mainstream media tries to come across as if they have this kind of impartiality, that they don't have a dog in the hunt. And because they come across that way, or at the very least try to project that, it makes it that much more disingenuous. Hillary Clinton was the choice of mainstream media, especially from the standpoint of MSNBC. That was their person. That's who all of the hosts were pushing for. That's who the majority of the hosts were pushing for. Let's say it that way. They had their playbook. It was clear who they were going for. This annoyance, Bernie Sanders. They didn't even want to cover Bernie Sanders when Bernie Sanders was running. It was only after he started winning states where it forced them to cover him. Sanders would have tens of thousands of people at his rallies and no media attention from the likes of MSNBC. He was an annoyance to them, and it was very clear who their choice was. Look at the softball interviews MSNBC was doing with Hillary Clinton. Look at the stuff Rachel Maddow was asking. Rachel Maddow asked Hillary Clinton one tough question. That tough question had to do with the Clinton Foundation. And when Hillary Clinton essentially, in a snarling way of like, I'm keeping my foundation, Rachel Maddow just, okay, and moved on. I've seen her eat Republicans alive with stuff like that, but for Clinton, softball. Chris Matthews. Now, Chris Matthews did somewhat of the same thing, with one exception being the Iraq War vote. And he lit into her with that, almost as if he had missed his pills or something, and the dose just kind of flipped. It was the bizarre thing, the way he flip-flopped back and forth. I'm just making a point that MSNBC had their clear person. Take a look at this. I showed part of this yesterday. This is a host incoherently attacking Sanders. What she's saying doesn't even make logical sense in the world to which she's created. It's eating itself. It's almost like a cognitive dissonance. Take a look at this. Now, they've removed the video that I initially pulled this from, but I still have the video that I did yesterday, allowing Jill to talk about this. I didn't get the chance to talk about it, so I'm talking about it now. You're going to see a lot more of these on things like MSNBC. They don't like Sanders. And they also don't like Tulsi. Sam Cedar is gone Tulsi deranged. Let's take a look at or listen to this. And I want to add a little bit more context to that, because I know I'm attacking MSNBC right now as being anti-Sanders, but I'm going to back that up, and I'm going to explain what I mean. I have evidence. This is the video from this.
So what you guys have learned about whether or not he's leaning towards running and whether he's under pressure not to run.
My colleague from Axios, Mike Allen, talked to a well-known Democratic operative who said, quote, it's terrible, or it's nuts, rather, that Bernie Sanders is considering running for president. The source said that they think it would be terrible for his personal political brand, his politics in Vermont. And, it's just a different time than it was in 2016. I think that there's a lot of sort of...
First, I talked to an anonymous source. I talked to some random person. And that random person, who we can't necessarily know who is or what their political identity is or how they lean politically, but this well-placed random person told me that we're at a different time, that it would be insane for Sanders to run. Do you know how nonsensical this is? This is utter ridiculous. Some random person told you that Bernie Sanders shouldn't run, and you're talking about this if this is political news. Your random source's opinion is not the same thing as political news. That's just the opinion of some random guy. And for all I know, that could be, some kind of Clinton operative, David Brock or something. Let's keep going. There's more.
The 2016 election for someone like Bernie Sanders, but the party is moving past his political ideology in a lot of ways. And even folks like the founder and publisher of Daily Kos, the notoriously progressive liberal website, he said just as much, that he thinks that Bernie Sanders' politics are not in line with the Democratic Party, because he thinks the Democratic Party has become more progressive and more outspoken.
So the notoriously progressive thing is the funniest shit in the planet. At that moment, at that time, crystallized in time on a YouTube video, but that was the funniest thing said that day. Notoriously progressive. That the Daily Kos is notoriously progressive. Notoriously democratic. Yes. Not necessarily notoriously progressive. And even still, these are the opinion of a few people. And that last opinion doesn't really make sense. They're saying that the party has moved to the left, and so the party has moved beyond Bernie Sanders' politics. If the party has moved to the left, the party has moved in line with Sanders' politics, not beyond it. It was Sanders that was pushing for the $15 minimum wage. Do you realize that Democrats in the House has introduced the $15 minimum wage? No, it's not going to go anywhere, but they introduced the bill to push it. Sanders was pushing for Medicare for all. You've had several Democrats sign on to Medicare for all. I don't have this belief that they're going to push it if they get power, but I'm making the point that the level and the way of conversation, the way we're processing and talking about the world from the standpoint of the left, involves Medicare for all, not a public option. Medicare for all. It involves tuition-free college. It involves expansion of Social Security. Like, these are things that people are talking about that has been put on the agenda from the standpoint of what it means to be on the left, and not the far left, but what it means to be on the left. Take a look at this. When you ask the majority of Democrats who they want, the majority of Democrats want a candidate to be more like Bernie Sanders. You don't say. Is it because they've moved to his policy positions or moved past his policy positions? That makes no sense. It's because they've come in line with his politics. The arguments that he was making, the range of debate or the level of debate, the Overton window, has shifted based on what he has full-throatedly pushed for. You find that the public is on board. Even Ocasio, her pushing the 70% tax rate. You find that the public is on board for that. They're like, yeah, we like that. We like that. Tax the rich. Yeah, we haven't heard that in a while. We like that. 70% marginal tax. Yes, we like it. We like it. It just makes, the argument just needs to be made. Part of the reason they fight so hard to keep this conversation suppressed, to keep this conversation out of the mainstream debate, is because the conversation works. It makes sense to most human beings. A full 57% of Democrat respondents said more like Bernie Sanders in response. 16% said less, with 27% said they're not sure. I'm always shocked at the not sure people who don't know what they mean, who they are. Only 13% of Republicans said they wanted candidates to be more like Sanders. That's hilarious. While 74% said less, independents were split. 27% said more like Sanders, 35% said less, and 38% said they weren't sure. I guess my point is, this doesn't look like they're moving past Sanders. This looks like they're catching up. That's what it looks like. And just to give you some context on MSNBC, don't forget Ed Shultz. When you hear those people out there gaslighting and spewing that stuff, they're not spewing it for their own good. They're spewing it because they're trying to change the opinion of somebody who's watching the show, who gets in their heads, yes, Bernie Sanders has passed. His time has passed. I like some of the stuff he's saying, but his time has passed. I mean, the person on MSNBC told me that an anonymous person told her. It has to be true. That has to be news. They're gaslighting. They're trying to give a perspective as if the larger body politic has a particular perspective, or the larger population has a perspective. They do not. It is two random people who, let's be honest, were not necessarily or not supportive of Sanders. This was a political conversation after all. Take a look at what Ed said. Ed makes the point that they fired him, or let's say, Ed makes the point that they fired him, or he believes they fired him at MSNBC because of his support of Sanders. And even goes further, saying that they exerted editorial control over the things that took place and the things that were said, including the things that didn't take place. Meaning Ed wanted to cover Sanders coming out. That sounds weird, like Sanders is coming out the closet or something, with ass chaps on. No, Sanders announcing that he was running for president. They wouldn't allow him to do so. Like, this is a company that exerts editorial control over the people, what they say, who's saying it, of course, who's saying it, but what they say. And of course, this is going to go to some level of who they support. Maybe not necessarily to, we want you to support X, but with the company has a perspective of things. Company has a perspective. Take a look at this. I mean, Jake Uger makes this point himself when he comes out and makes this point of saying, the editorial control they exert, saying, hey, stop beating up on the guests, that type of stuff. We were getting calls from Washington that you were being too rough with the guests. And to some degree, he believes that he was demoted for similar reasons. In Ed's case, though, Ed was trying to support Sanders, and apparently they didn't like that. Let's take a look at this.
Really don't know when I'm going to give it up. I'm enjoying it that much.
He's talking about his time on RT right now.
So what are the differences? And I want to make this very clear, and I hope your audience consumes this. There was more oversight and more direction given to me on content at MSNBC than ever has been here at RT. And I think that it's very sad that that story is not getting out. I think it's many times I was told what to lead with on MSNBC. Many times I was told what I was not going to do, and I've got a story that had I not been involved in it, I would have never believed it. And Phil Griffin, who I consider a friend to this day, was a watchdog, far more than anything I am exposed to here at RT America.
Did he tell you what to say? Did he tell you an angle to take?
Often. In fact, when Bernie Sanders was announcing that he was going to be a candidate for the nomination of the Democratic Party in Burlington, Vermont, I was the only cable host between Fox, MSNBC, and CNN that was there live to cover it. Now, there were live cameras there, but we had coordinated with the Sanders campaign. At 5 o'clock, he was going to make his announcement, and we were going to cover this on the Ed Show. I go to Bernie Sanders' house that afternoon and interview in the backyard, about a 15-minute interview. The grandkids are running around. It's a big day for the Sanders family. He's going to announce that he's running for president. We're going to carry it live later on in the day, and we're going to run this one-on-one tape with Bernie. 3,000 people are there on Lake Champlain. It's 5 minutes to air, and I get a phone call from Phil Griffin. You're not covering this. I said, Phil, Bernie Sanders is announcing he's running for president. He's going to be a president. I don't care. You're not covering this. And it got rather contentious. And
Why, though?
I don't, well, now you're asking me for opinion. I'm giving you fact right now about what happened. Mm-hmm. And other people who were there with me will attest to the fact and back me up that this is what happened. We were told that we had to cover something down in Texas that was totally meaningless, and another press conference in Baltimore, which was already had been in the news for a few days. We're covering Bernie Sanders live. We're coordinated with his campaign. And I'm told 5 minutes before, you're not covering Bernie Sanders. Now, let me give you the opinion. I think the Clintons were connected to Andy Lack, connected at the hip. I think that they didn't want anybody in their prime time or anywhere in their lineup supporting Bernie Sanders. I think that they were in the tank for Hillary Clinton, and I think it was managed, and 45 days later, I was out at MSNBC. And I thought it stunk. They gave me my contract. I signed a non-disclosure agreement and also a no bad-mouthing agreement, which I felt good with because I thought that this was over time, all going to wash out. And I knew if Bernie Sanders didn't win, he was going to run again because the man is determined. So I was patient and took my money and went on. But the fact of the matter is, I think I've got a hell of a story to tell.
That's MSNBC. That's MSNBC. That's the network that had that woman on bashing Sanders. And for the next 2 years, they're going to have a lot of other people on in order to bash Sanders. Not just people who they have on, also hosts. But understand, underlying all of that It's not necessarily this objective media organization that tries to just be the truth and the honesty and integrity and all this other stuff. They have political connections where, in this case, they had a clear preference. The preference was not Sanders, and they were perfectly okay with trying to put a knife in him or completely ignoring him. In this case, if Sanders runs again, do you honestly believe that people like this, she's not going to be the last person? That's my point. You're going to see a lot of it. Just remember that the perspective of the network is pro-Democrat, and they don't think Sanders is a Democrat.